We are recording, Johnny. How are you today?
All right. Thanks, Stu, for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. We've already been chatting about the fact that it's -2 in the UK at the moment, and there's glorious sunshine behind you coming through your window in LA. So I hope you're enjoying that.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. It's very, very good.
Lovely, lovely. Johnny, we always start the show the same way. We kick things off with intros. So I'm going to ask you, please, to start your playlist by telling me the song that you regard as having the greatest ever intro, please.
Oh, it's a long list, but the one that sprang to mind was "Hot for Teacher" by Van Halen. That one really blew my mind when I was 10 years old and it came out. Um, and I still get excited hearing it, even though I've heard it 10,000 times,
Yeah.
in the last 40 years. I just think it's an incredible intro. Um, it's just exciting. It's just there's something about it, it's a sound of someone's car. It's a car engine that turns into like this 40s jump band drum solo from this hard rock band, the hugest band in the world at the time in the 70s and 80s. And they sound like, they're backing Louis Prima,
Yeah.
and this guitar comes in that's just so wild and so thrilling and imaginative and passionate, and it's just crazy, and it's just this beautiful explosion. It's like fireworks.
Johnny, I'm always curious to know that as an intro, obviously the Van Halen track you chose, it's a long intro, it's pretty frenzied, and I imagine they had no issues getting that over the line with a record company back when that came out. However, I think if we look at 2025 and the way that attention spans seem to be getting shorter, and now everything seems to be happening via streaming services and things like that. Um, it appears, there's so much more music that seems to just instantly start with a chorus now, and there seems to be so much attention. I guess where streaming services are awash with new music every day to try and hook them. I don't necessarily think that's right or wrong, but I'm curious. Does the way that I guess the trends, I guess you could call it in music, and and people sort of even, I'm going right the way around the houses with this question, but bear with me, Johnny. Um, and in these trends that people are using at the moment, and these people using things like TikTok to get their music out there, and TikTok is these bite-sized snippets, um, which seems to be catering for this tightening of attention spans. Does any of that stuff filter through into your creative process at all?
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I mean, everyone's affected by everything that they're exposed to. It doesn't necessarily mean you allow yourself to be pushed that way. Maybe it inspires you to go the opposite direction. I don't know. I'm on TikTok, and I don't really do much. You know what I mean? Like I kind of limit my exposure to all of it. I'll dip in when I feel like it. Um, and as far as limited attention span, like I think that's certainly true, but like I don't know. I remember I realized a few years ago that some of my biggest musical inspirations were I used to watch TV like 8 or 10 hours a day when I was a kid. I just like all I did was watch TV and MTV, and that's largely how I learned how to play. Um, I was really influenced by commercials and TV show themes. I grew up in the 80s where there was great TV show themes, whether it was shows happening at the time, or like MASH or like syndicated shows, like Sanford and Son and The Jeffersons and all these great songs, whether it was from the TV show themes or the commercials. You have to pack a lot of information into 30 seconds or less, sometimes just 5 seconds, like a little hook. I love that. I think that's fascinating. And it's really hard to do well. Um, I think all that really matters is communication. It doesn't matter what era we're talking about or what the method of delivery is. and you can blather on and on for minutes and hours and not say anything, or you can say a whole world in 5 seconds. What really matters is just what's being communicated.
Absolutely. Do you know what, Johnny? I've asked that question. I've done nearly 600 episodes of this show now, and I've asked that question so many times, and nobody has ever answered it like you, and nobody has ever referenced TV shows and TV show themes, which is so important because that shaped so much stuff. I mean, even in the UK, like growing up in the 80s as well, like I would
What's
park up.
Ed?
I mean, seriously, like I think I mean, as far as the A team goes, the intro to the A team just starting straight away is ridiculously amazing. Um, but for me, I was literally just going over and over my how excited I would get. I wasn't even interested in the show, but I wanted to hear the Cagney and Lacey theme tune because it was so good.
Oh yeah, I was that way. Do you remember a show called The Equalizer?
Yeah, of course, Edward Woodward.
Edward Woodward. Oh, I was obsessed with that show. But really, I was obsessed with the theme song with Stuart
Yeah,
Copeland from The Police. He did the theme for that. It was such a great. I can play it today. Such a great theme.
love it, love it.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I now just want to talk about 80s TV shows now for the next hour.
I'm down.
um, Johnny, tell me now for track two, please. The first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please.
Yeah, when I was 5, I discovered my parents' record collection, which was pretty large. It had all sorts of stuff in there. My mom was really into classical music and like Israeli folk music. My dad was really into jazz, all sorts of stuff. I remember they had Switched on Bach by Wendy Carlos. Back then it was Walter Carlos, like it was a long
Wow.
time. Just all sorts of different music. But the two records I really gravitated towards was those Beatles best ofs, the red one and those primary color blue and red ones. And the red one was the early, I think like 61 to 64 or
Yeah.
something. Um, I just totally fell in love with that. And I mean, so many songs off of that record, but She Loves You, I remember just feeling, I can remember like being 5, 6 years old and my mom like yelling at me from the bottom of the stairs to go to school. And I just wanted to hear it one more time, that, or, I want to hold your hand, or like I could have picked like any Beatles song really, but I remember very vividly She Loves You, just that drum intro and just the melody. And it was just like tore my heart out.
Yeah.
It just felt so, there was so much aching and longing, but it was like so jubilant. It was just like so exciting. And obviously, like, you're 5 or you're a kid, or whatever, like you don't analyze it. Like talking about it now, even still, it's just like it's hard to talk about music, but like I don't know why I liked it. I just did. It was just
Yeah.
so incredibly thrilling to me. It just made me feel so happy. It was just in like the Beatles were just this incredible sanctuary, you know. Um, yeah,
I,
that was amazing.
I think like the thing that blows my mind with artists like the Beatles and the Smiths as well is like and even sort of bands like REM as well. Like in actually quite a short time that they actually existed as a band, the body of work they put out, the amount of it, and the progression from record to record, I don't think it's ever been equaled. I think like if you look at
Pretty staggering.
maybe not so much REM. Obviously, REM's had a much longer career, but the Beatles from like beginning to end was quite a short period of time, and it was just ridiculous the output. And
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was thinking about that very thing the other day, actually. It's really remarkable. I mean, there's so much music I love, and for me personally, so much music and so many artists and bands that have had such a huge impact on me. But there's something about the Beatles that's just like so extraordinary. Um, and I don't know, maybe I'm sure part of it was the times. Obviously they have the talent and they had the discipline and the passion and the interest in working their talent and really realizing what they could do. Um, it was just like this confluence of influences of things coming together, whether it was Brian Epstein or George Martin, like all these incredible people with them. And the fact that the four of them found each other is just like so mind-boggling.
Yeah.
All four of them were so unique
Yeah.
and so gifted. And you listen to like the earliest stuff and they're really good, but they're just a rock and roll band. You know what I mean? Like a lot of rock and roll bands existed, and what they turned into, it's just like where did that come from? You know, like
I,
how, and like to be that experimental and that allow themselves to change that radically and not get off the track. Like it never feels like inauthentic. It always feels like it's them. I don't know. I don't know how to qualify it exactly. It's just, but it really is like unreal.
it's ridiculous, and those, like you say, that you've got a greatest hits album in that Red album. That's just a couple of years, and in that couple of years, like they're all of them singles are just off the scale good, and just from within that couple of years, they go from "She Loves You" to
Tomorrow
fucking
never
"Tomorrow
knows.
Never Knows," and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like, come on, like, how does that happen?
yeah.
It's yeah, absolutely amazing. Um,
Yeah, I'm sure technology played a part in it too. You
yeah,
know, I
of
mean,
course,
things were very new. Like rock and roll was very new, and recording techniques were still being developed. And you know, they were really blessed to have somebody like George Martin and
yeah,
Jeff Emerick and all the engineers with them, and just to be able to say, I want to try this thing, and have people with them that were able and willing to help carry it out. Yeah, it's really that was a man, what a gift to the world.
absolutely. Johnny, you referenced some of the music you was exposed to via your parents a moment ago. Tell me a little bit more about where growing up was, and just how musical was home. Was there instruments laying around? You exposed to stuff like that?
Yeah, we had a baby grand piano. My mom played piano. My dad didn't play anything. He was a big music fan, big, especially jazz. Um, like I remember, you know, I grew up in Wilmette, which is 2 cities north of Chicago. Um, and the great thing about Wilmette, aside from it being right on the lake and it's very pretty, it's the last stop on the red line for the L, which is the subway. They call it the L, like the elevated, because it's above ground. It's not an underground subway. For most of it anyway. So you could get out, you know, like as soon as I was about 12, I started going into the city. Um, I was 12 and I had a friend named Cleopatra. That's his real name. He lived
That's a
like
ridiculously cool name.
yeah, I met him at this guitar store in Evanston, which is between Wilmette and Chicago, that I used to go to all the time when I was a little kid. And he lived way in the city, like deep in the ghetto, like in the worst part of Chicago, the southwest side, Jackson and Karloff. So I would take the L. I would tell my parents I was going to, you know, the library or something. I'd take the train. It took me like 2 hours to get there because he was, you know, I was a Jimi Hendrix freak. I mean, I still am, but like, it's, you know how it is when you're like 12, forget it. And this guy, he was sort of a Jimi Hendrix imitator. And he had, it was before the vintage boom really exploded. So he had like a wall of Marshall Stacks and Fender Stratocasters and fuzz faces and wah wah pedals. Like it was incredible. And, we used to just like he would just like crank it up like he was in an apartment building, but he would just like turn everything to 10 and just like let me, you know, play his stuff, and it was amazing. And we'd, you know, go to his haberdasher and get hats made and go buy silk socks and you know. So so I grew up the first couple years of my life in the city, but then we moved to Wilmette when I was a little kid. So I grew up in the suburbs, but close enough to the city where I had easy access to it. And the Metro is a great club. It's still there, like one of the best clubs in the world. I think it holds maybe 1,000 people. It's beautiful. This beautiful old building, 100-year-old building. You know, you step into it, feel like you're in a picture frame, whether you're on stage or in the audience. I've seen so many incredible shows there. So that was amazing. And they have, you know, they would have tons of all ages shows. So I was going into the city really regularly, going to head shops and just like hang out in the city. Um, and as far as instruments, We had a piano that I never took. I took like one or two lessons. I didn't like. I remember Mr. Linderman. I can still picture him. When I picture me, he looks like Grand Moff Tarkin from Star Wars. He looked like a long cigarette ash. It's just like, he was just it's like an undertaker. I was just not interested.
Yeah.
He made me like want to just go take a nap. So I just taught myself. I mean, it's piano. It's just all right there. I mean, you go on YouTube, like cats know how to play piano. Like anyone can do it. You just like just figure it out. Just pattern recognition and just like messing around. Um, and I have an older brother. He's 4 years older. I forget who started playing first. We might have started playing at the same time. I started playing ukulele at 9, because I had a great teacher in fourth grade named Mr. Spangenberger, and on Friday afternoons he would whip out his acoustic guitar and sing us folk songs and like Beatles songs and Judy Collins and John Denver and stuff like that. And uh, I was totally enamored because I loved music. Um, but I'd never really seen anybody do it up close. And he would let me like hold the guitar, and my hands were really small, so my parents got me a baritone ukulele, which is the top four strings of a guitar, and I just completely devoured it. I just bought they bought me a chord book, and I just taught myself how to play all these songs. All I wanted to do is like play Beatles and Monkees songs. Like I didn't really have, that's all I cared about was like the Beatles and the Monkees. And, by that point, we had cable TV. I was watching MTV, massive Duran Duran fan. And like, it was a great era for pop music. It's really imaginative. The whole idea was, to be as different as everyone else as possible, like to really do your own thing. Adam Ant, Tom Petty, Prince, In Excess, like all these great, great bands, great songs. So I just wanted in, and it wasn't anything other than just like I love music. I want to be a part of it. I want to hear it coming out of my body. Like I want to sing these songs. So I wouldn't really buy records either. I would watch MTV, and I would go to Kurt Saphir Pianos, like this piano store a few blocks away, and they had a huge wall of sheet music. So if I was interested in a song, hit song "Don't Pay the Ferryman" or something, like me or my mom or whoever, like I'd spend 350 and buy the sheet music so I could learn how to play it. I could sing it because I could hear it in my head. I'd see the video, 10 times an hour on MTV. And I wouldn't really listen to radio either. It was all MTV and just watching TV and just listening to records and sheet music. And I started playing guitar a year later when my hands got big enough at 10. And my parents were both super, super supportive of me and my brother. Um, so he plays bass and a little guitar. We would kind of switch, because we were just like live in the same house. He tried stuff, and he had a upright bass. And, I learned how to play just from it being around, and got a drum set in high school a few years later. And that was it. My parents were like very, very supportive, and like, would be very tolerant and accepting of lots of noise. And, I'm in a drum set. Come on, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I've supported, both my kids in their hobbies, but buy them a drum kit? Nah.
That
No,
takes
man.
a special parent.
I'm going to ask you for track three. Let's stay in the formative years for this one. Tell me the song that reminds you of your time at school, please, Johnny.
Yeah, well, grammar school, like around fourth grade or so, I would say "Hungry Like the Wolf" by Duran Duran. I
I
remember
mean,
being super obsessed with that.
I still to this day think that's their best single.
It's a great record. I'd still listen to Rio. Rio's a great record. So many
Mm,
good songs on it. I mean, the whole
yeah,
record. It's like, The Chauffeur,
yeah.
Rio, Lonely Near Nightmare. So many good songs.
Duran
I mean,
Duran were never struggling for a good single. They've got bags of them, and just looked incredible. And like you say, you
yeah.
catch the MTV generation at that point. MTV being this new thing, and all of a sudden you've just got Duran Duran videos, which were just different level to what most people were doing.
Yeah, I love those videos. Those songs were amazing. Just great melodies, really interesting chord progressions, and just I don't know. And, in retrospect, you can piece it together like, oh yeah, they've got a lot of Roxy in them, and like Japan, obviously, and different influences. But I think they're a great band. I love that music. I love Simon's voice. Um, yeah, I feel really lucky to have grown up in the '80s. There was still very much a Beatles and '60s influence of all those great bands, because like the '60s were incredible for songwriting and for bands and just for creativity. You know, just so many unique individuals expressing themselves in a really vibrant and honest way. Whether it's the Beatles or the Kinks or the Who or Joan Baez and Dylan and Richie Havens and just Allen Ginsberg, and so much poetry and film, and it really was like this extraordinary explosion of creativity and human imagination. And that was still lingering in the air. And I get it too. Like I'm sure, if I were a couple decades older in the '80s, maybe I would have been lamenting like, oh, like because you hear about people talking how the '80s were so corporatized and it was all about money, and I get that too now. But like, when you're a kid, all you know is like what's in front of you. And to me, like MTV was brilliant, and I loved videos, and I loved all these bands, not all the bands, but like, a lot of the bands. And it was a very thrilling time. So I understand, all those different perspectives now, but I think it was really creative and really fun. And, the '80s to me, there's a lot of different moods that existed, but for me anyway, like one of the primary things was just it was just a very jubilant, celebratory time, you know. I mean, and sometimes like off the charts, like just goofball, ridiculous, like especially like mid late '80s. Like you look back at some of those clothes and some of the songs, it's just like a little bit too much cocaine happening, but I don't
Do you
know.
know what, right? Like, it does, everything does get a little bit more kind of overblown in the sort of mid to late 80s. But I think the one thing that runs through it all, and even in the early 80s, like in the UK, with like what was going on with the new romantic movement, and we was getting sort of the carryover with post punk, and we was getting ska and two tone, and
Hmm.
it was such a fantastic little kind of pockets of movements that were all going on at once, and then even all of them, and then going right the way through to, I guess say the Smiths again, and stuff like that in the UK, and then obviously all the your Duran Durans and your Spandau Ballets become these huge global bands, and Depeche Mode and such, and but I think one of the things that stays right the way consistent throughout the whole of the 80s, even as you get into like some of the kind of like De La Soul, and the sort of evolution of like electronic music into like house music and stuff like that in the late 80s. One thing that is consistent is the pop sensibilities, and there's just such good pop melodies in all of that, whether it be ska, whether it be that sort of new romantic thing. I just think the 80s just crafted such fantastic pop records.
Yeah, people, songwriting was still a thing, and it's not so much these days. And that's not even necessarily a criticism. Um, there's all sorts of ways to make music. Um, but I love songwriting, and it's a craft. Like it's something you learn. It's something you learn from listening to other people and listening to records, and by studying, and just again, it's just pattern recognition, really. Like that was one thing that was really kind of a cool thing looking back, that I got sheet music instead of the records,
Yeah,
because I could see it laid out. I could see like, oh, here's the verse, it lasts this long. Oh, here's the chorus, it only lasts this long. Oh, here's the chords. And I started to recognize like, oh, the same C chord I'm playing,
sure.
in this one song is used in this other song too. And like, and I've always been into all sorts of music, and especially when I got older, being like jazz band, and like, being exposed to all sorts of different genres and styles, and realizing like, oh wow, like the Beatles really took a lot from, like Irving Berlin, or from the or the Kinks, doing, and the Who, like dance hall music, from the 20s and 30s and 40s, and you start to put the pieces together where like there really isn't much of a difference in a lot of ways. Like it's usually surface differences. Like maybe, these records from decades ago were utilizing like banjo and clarinets and stuff like that. But like it's that, the essence of the song isn't really that different from the Kinks who are using guitars and, traditional rock band instrumentation, or you know what I mean? Like you start to pick up on all these kind of things.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, I love I love music. I love human creativity. Like whatever, it's whatever you can just tell when someone is inspired and just doing something honestly and passionately.
Yeah.
But I really do love songs, and I miss like great songwriting and melodies. And to me, I don't, I mean, I get it, like, we call things pop or whatever, but like it's just melody. You know what I mean? It doesn't
Yeah.
matter
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Motorhead had melodies, Ozzy's got melodies, there's melody in Queens of the Stone Age. I wouldn't call them a pop band really, there's Iggy Pop has great melodies. Bob Dylan is a great melodicist, you know. Jimi Hendrix, no one would ever call him a pop artist really,
Yeah.
but and maybe his melodies are more often found like in his guitar solos, or but even there's a lot of vocal melodies that he was very melodic. And
Yeah.
oh uh yeah, there you
I'm going to ask you to tell me the first song you remember buying from a record store, please, Johnny.
go. The first one I remember buying is the Essential Jimi Hendrix Volume 2. Um, I was probably 10. Um,
That's a cool first record.
it was a good one. Yeah, it had Hey Joe and uh Machine Gun by Band of Gypsies, and it came with a 12-inch vinyl, but it also came with a 7-inch single of a cover of Gloria, the Them song, the Van
Yeah.
Morrison song. Um, and I was just discovering Jimi Hendrix, and like it was pretty incredible. An older a family friend who's he was a teenager, but he was considerably older than me at the time. I mean, he still is, but he taught me how to play Purple Haze, and that was pretty mind blowing. Um, and I guess really that actually he also sold me my first. I think that was the first record I bought. Was I paid like I think it was $6 for this Monkeys compilation. I still have it. It's a great compilation. So that might have been the first record that I spent money on. But the one that I went to a record store, I went to in Wilmette, there's this great little record store called Off the Record, owned by this woman, Alice Pringle. I can still picture her. She had this very severe bowl cut. She sort of looked when I read the Scarlet Letter in high school later, I always pictured her when I would read about Hester Prynne. Like she just seemed like very Hester Prynne like. Um, very prim and proper, and like, oh Johnny, we got this. There's a new Swedish guitar player named Yngwie Malmsteen. I think you might be interested. I remember, so I bought it and then I returned it the next week. I was like, it's not really my thing. I remember like there was a massive poster of blah 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 Iggy Pop, like like years before I really started listening to him. I was just like, oh, he looks interesting. This is sort of
Yeah.
scary, you know. I remember seeing, I wish I'd followed my impulses. I remember being a little kid and seeing Bad Music for Bad People, that the Cramps compilation. Like, oh, this is kind of interesting, Should have just
Yeah.
bought it. Would have warped me a lot sooner.
I
That's
remember
all
go-
right.
I remember going into like my local library and that you used to be able to like rent like hire like records when I was a little kid. And I remember going in there and I was just looking for all the big pop bands that I've seen on like TV shows. And then I remember seeing the cover for Trans Europe Express by
Mhm.
Kraftwerk and seeing them on the back and just thinking, whoa, what the fuck's going on here, man? These guys look, are they real? I remember just like staring at it for so long, just trying to work out what the deal was with Kraftwerk.
Yeah,
And then when you hear it, that don't help. It's like, it just got even weirder now. Like, what's
yeah,
happening? Like, where have
yeah,
these people been beamed down from? Like, I can't get my head around it.
yeah.
Uh,
How
uh,
cool is that?
yeah,
Yeah,
and it was
oh, go ahead.
and it was seeing things like like that photo of Iggy where he's sort of standing on the crowd and he's got his chest out, and seeing things like the Cramps. It was like things that were just a little unnerving and a little bit kind of confrontational. And it was like, oh, this is a bit weird. This isn't
Yeah,
it,
especially
it,
when you're a kid.
yeah, it was fascinating and it was
Yeah,
darker.
everything is new and mind expanding. But that was a big thing for me too. I remember very clearly going, I would walk to the library when I would actually go. And you could for a dime, you could rent a CD and I would do that all the time. I remember like, checking out Andalusian music and getting into NRBQ and like all these different bands just from, I don't know, I'll check this out. I remember getting Magic and Lost by Lou Reed, one of my favorite records that blew my mind. Um, and obviously with Spotify, it's a double-edged sword. Like I
It
love the
is.
fact that, I mean, politics of how they operate aside, I love the fact that you can have access to, so much music. Like it feels like the entirety of recorded music. Um, and it's great for checking stuff out and like doing research and, just like trying things. But I don't like the way it's changed the way I listen to music. I do love how convenient it is. What I was living in New York for a few years, like it was great just being able to walk around and like have everything at my fingertips and same with being in LA, being back in LA, like driving around, whatever. But like I miss like the physical discovery of like associating, a piece of music with the photos and with the credits and the lyrics and just the whole package. And like this real visceral personal experience where you feel like you're entering a world and there's a
Yeah.
physical object, excuse me, attached to it you know, and the whole sense of, contact or with content, like one of my favorite records of all time is Karma by Pharoah Sanders. It's two songs.
Yeah.
It's like each side is like 20 minutes or whatever, and like, but you look at it on a playlist, like, oh, you couldn't have come up with any more content than this, It's like, that's not a way to,
Yeah.
uh, that's not the shit. But we got both. We got all of it. I still.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm going to ask you to tell me the song that soundtracked your year's clubbing, please, Johnny.
That would be so many songs, but the ones I can actually remember through that drunken haze, I just remember hearing "Closer" by Nine Inch Nails all the time. That was just everywhere. What was that, 93 or something like that? And that would, it would last for years. Like, and you
Mm.
remember when a song was a hit, you'd hear it for years. Um,
If it makes you feel any better, like I run a club in Essex and have done for over 30 years. Closer still gets played every Friday night, and it
yeah, I'm
still
sure.
sounds fucking incredible, man.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a great track, great song, great groove.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean that was just an incredible feeling. Yeah, when Nine Inch Nails came out, that was just so earth-shattering. And I grew up in Chicago, so like, I was, I loved Ministry, I'm trying to remember which I heard first. No, I'm sure I heard Ministry before I heard Nine
yeah.
Inch Nails.
Like Jesus Built My Hot Rod and NWO, and that was all. That was pre. Well, I don't know. I suppose like
Because
Hate
Pre-Hate
Machine.
Machine came out in
Yeah, that was
89.
probably. Yeah, yeah. It's probably
Did it?
a lot in it.
Because I didn't discover Pretty Hate Machine until my first year of college, which was
Yeah,
1991. So I guess I was a little later for him for
yeah,
that band. But yeah, I mean whatever. Like that whole, movement was just very thrilling
yeah.
and just like so scary. And it's like, I don't know. It was great.
It was a natural thing. Like for where my club is and where I live is the hometown of Depeche Mode, and so they're like our hometown heroes. And things with that band got darker and darker and darker. And then by the time they release Violator, then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it's like, right, where are they going to go from here? And before you get Songs of Faith and Devotion, all of a sudden Nine Inch Nails pop up, and it's like this feels like a natural progression for where my music tastes are going. The
Yeah.
electronic stuff was getting harder and darker, and Pretty Hate Machine drops, and it's like, wow, this is fantastic. And like you say, your ministries and stuff like that.
Hmm. Yeah, an amazing time. I love seeing how it all fits together too.
Yeah,
Like Brian Eno talks about how you know artists are revered as these, the ones that end up being famous and remaining famous and known for a, particular, like leaders of a movement. But just talking about how it really, if you really study movements and um, what's going on, like there's always it's a community. There's always people that get lost in the shuffle that don't receive any acclaim or are forgotten, but it's never just one person or one band. That there's always like some constellation of artists that are working, maybe not together, but like, in the same neck of the woods, either physically or artistically, and it all kind of bubbles up. And where it ends up is where it ends up, like as far as like the public consciousness, but it's never just like just one person, even though it might seem that way.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, I'm going to take you home for this track,
All right.
and I'm going to ask you to tell me your favorite track from an artist from your home county, please.
Home county?
It's okay if you've gone country. You'll be the 570th person to do it on the 600 episodes so far. So you're not
I
alone there. Everyone says it every time I ask that question. I just think I know what they're going to say. They're going to go, "Oh, county." So don't worry.
thought that was a mystery. I thought you're writing home country.
No,
Home.
we stick with country. It's fine. It's fine.
Hmm. Well, I actually, I guess it really was my home county because the first answer was Jesus Built My Hot Rod by Ministry. Even
Yeah.
though Albert Jorgensen, he's from Cuba, but Ministry, was based in Chicago. Um, but
I mean, let's talk about Jesus Built My Heart, Rob. What a fucking crazy record, man.
that's incredible. I don't think that I don't think they've ever played it live. Like I don't know how you could without Gibby.
I don't know how.
Yeah, and that was a big mind-blowing band for me with Butthole Surfers. I discovered them like 14, 15. So by the time Jesus came out, oh man. And that's another one. It still thrills me just like as much as, Hot for Teacher or anything really. It's like I hear it, it's like I can't believe like it still is this exciting to me.
Yeah. Have you seen Ministry?
I've never seen them. I think I was on tour with them. Uh, was it? Well, I did Lollapalooza in 1996 when it was still a touring festival. I think they might have been on I can't remember. Things start to,
They were on.
I don't think I've ever seen them.
I'm just reading a book by the front person of Lush, and Ministry were on that Lollapalooza, and that was with Pearl Jam,
93 or something.
Chili Peppers,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, the Jesus and Mary chain, and I remember she was saying in it that it was Lush, then Pearl Jam, and then Jesus and Mary chain. But in the time that tour come together, Pearl Jam literally become the biggest band on the planet, and so people were losing their shit to Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, these two Scottish brothers walk out and just plug in these noisy guitars, and they were very unhappy because after Pearl Jam, the Mary Chain were just like, "Oh shit, man, this is a tough gig." It was,
Yeah, I wouldn't have felt that way, but I get
like,
it.
no, same. I'm a massive Mary Chain fan, but like, I guess if you just got a load of drunken grungers just wanting
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
jump around, they probably don't want some glorious racket from Scotland. But yeah,
Yeah,
um,
thankfully for them, they didn't have the Butthole Surfers with Gibby, the shotgun with blanks in it.
yeah, yeah,
Really
crazy
freaked
man,
them out.
crazy man. Um, so I'm going to ask you for your last track now, and I'm going to ask you to tell the listeners of the podcast about a track that you think they may not know that you love.
Yeah, there's a band called Butterfly Child. Um, it was really one guy, Joe Cassidy from Belfast in Ireland. And he lived all over the place. He lived in London for years and was on Rough Trade. And there's a bunch of EPs and full-length records out on Rough Trade and Bella Union, like a few different labels. And we met. We were dear, dear friends. He moved to Chicago in the mid '90s. Um, and he died a few years ago, about 3 years ago. And he was just an incredible songwriter and singer, gorgeous, looked like a black-haired Sting, and just the sweetest, coolest, strongest person I've ever met. Just one of my dearest friends. And everyone who met him felt that way. Like he was one of those people who were like, well, he was my best friend. No, he was my best friend. Everyone felt that way, you know? Just an earth angel. And you can hear it in the music. And I love a lot of his music. I thought his last record is called Futures, and that came out, I guess, in maybe 2019 or something like that. But I think it's one of his best records, and there's a song on it called Lost in These Machines that's just so incredible. It just feels like you're in a wind tunnel. It's just like it's just this visceral, just this incredible, it's like really romantic and really just kind of this devastating, sort of dark and strange, beautiful. It's a whole mix of things that you can't quite put your finger on. Just like this very dreamlike, um, just this. It's like you're standing in back of a plane taking off. It's just like
Yeah.
this really wonderful experience. So he's that band and Joe are definitely worth listening to and checking out.
Johnny, we make it nice and easy for the listeners to do that because we put together a little Spotify playlist to
All
accompany
right.
the podcast with all of the tracks that we've spoken about today. And obviously your music will be on there as well. And we spoke about so many great artists, and yet we've not spoke about your music yet. So what's going on? Bring us up to speed.
Well, I released a couple of records the last couple of years. It came out on Stone Gossard's label. Um, and I'm looking for a new label. I've got a new record that I'm going to put out this year. It's very electronic based. I mean, there's still, it's kind of just melodic, moody rock songs, but more in the vein of like Love and Rockets, Cure, little splash of David Lynch in there. I love
Oh wow.
Julie Cruz, that kind of stuff. Um, and some Gary Newman, like it's like just kind of moody and lot of synths and drum machines, but a lot of guitars and a lot of like wild guitar solos. Um, so I've got that record, and I made a record with David J last year that hopefully will be coming out soon. It was me and him. I mean, it's his thing, but I was playing guitar, and two of the Swans were playing on it, the drummer and
Wow.
keyboard player. Yeah. Um, and hopefully that will see the light of day soon. Um, I'm playing with Christabel a little bit. We're about to play a gig, just a duo gig, who's a singer I love. She's one of my favorite contemporary artists. I love the records she's made with David Lynch. Huge David Lynch fan. I love the movies, obviously, but like I love the music he made. Those two Julie Cruz records were huge for me, still
Yeah.
are. I love lyrics. I love the music. His solo records, which a lot of people don't even know he made solo records. Crazy Clown Time is a classic. I love that record. Um, and he made two records and an EP with Christabel. This Train, which came out 15 years ago or something. I love that record, and I love the one that came out just a few months ago from last year, Cellophane Memories. Really strange and dense, and just this odd, beautiful record. So I'm thrilled to be playing with her a little bit. Um, and I moved back to LA about a year ago, so it took me a little bit to get situated, and I feel pretty well uh plugged back into the town. The fires just happened, so that was pretty devastating. But
Yeah, yeah.
fortunately, it avoided my neighborhood, which I'm super thankful about. Um, and just I'm just gonna put this record out and hit the road and just, more of the same.
And if people want to find out about releases, tour dates, and stuff like that, where's the best place to keep up with you, Johnny?
Probably Instagram. I'm the Jonny Polonsky, you know.
And if it's cool with you, when we drop this, we'll tag you in it. So if any of the followers of this podcast aren't following you already, we make it nice and easy for them to go and
All
do
right.
so.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Stu.
Johnny, it's been an absolute delight talking records with you, mate. Like
Yeah, it's super
you
fun.
chose records that I got. So it's really weird. Sometimes guests come on and I'm like, oh yeah, 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 I really like that tune. Yeah, and I'm just thinking, I'm not blown away by that one. But you just chose loads of records that I love, so you made it a nice, easy conversation today.
All
So
right
thank
on.
you,
Yeah, it was
mate.
super fun. Thanks for having me, man.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I'm going to press stop, but don't go anywhere.
Okay.